Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I step out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, hello listeners. It's a lovely day here in suburban Chicago. It's cloudy, but the weather is nice. It's temperate, a little on the cool side for mid-April, but we're in this middle of this weird up and down weather cycle. So I've reached an interesting point. I've gotten all caught up on the games I've been playing, but April has turned out to be a month of playing games I've already played. I only have like 2 or 3 new games on my list for April so far, and it's April 20th or 21st today. Yikes. And I've played plenty of games. It's just so happened that I'm playing a lot of games I've played before, which is fine, except that it means I don't have as many new games to talk about, but that's okay. I'm happy to talk about other new games anyway. Well, here we go. So I do have 3 though. I have 2 from the end of March and 1 more of the new ones. Actually 1 from the end of March and 2 from April. And then I'm all caught up. I don't have any new ones to talk about for a while. But let's just jump into it. That's right, it's time for a Board Game Espresso triple shot. If you haven't heard this episode before or this segment, this is in which I talk about 3 games I've played recently for the first or maybe first and second time, talk about my experience playing them, and give you some first impressions. This isn't a review proper. I haven't played a game enough times in 1 or 2 plays to really have a sense of everything there is to know about the game, but I think it's reasonable for me to give you some impressions. So that's what we're going to do. If I have time, I may also talk about a game that I brought out of the dust and played this month. So let's just jump into it. To start with, I played Trekking the World. Now, to be fair, I did play this on Board Game Arena, so I did not play it on the table, which certainly does change the experience of the game. Absolutely, 100%. That said, I have played Trekking the National Parks, and these games are similar, so I feel like I got enough of a sense of it that I can talk about it a little bit here. Trekking the World is a game themed around travel. It has pretty nice art, not entirely dissimilar from Parks, not as nice as Parks. The graphic design is a bit more rudimentary. The game is in the sort of same family of weight and strategy level as Ticket to Ride. In this game, there are a series of visible destinations, and you can collect those destinations by playing combinations of cards of different suits. There's like a row of cards similar to the Ticket to Ride row of train cars, and you collect the cards in different colors, and then you spend them to gain these locations. You also have a distance that you can travel each turn, and then the third key element is there's a grid of there's a passport grid that has a bunch of spots on it with different colors, and whenever you travel to a location, you get a cube based on where you landed, and that cube goes onto your grid, and there's an alternate scoring element in that grid. When you have the first person to get a certain number of cubes of a certain color gets a scoring thing, and if you stay in the lead with that, you get to keep it. There's also an element for when you complete a column, you get a bonus, a column of all the different colors as well. So there's a number of different things going on here. The main way that you score points is by completing trips, by going to a place where there's a destination and spending the cards of the right color. Overall, it was fun. I found it fun to play, a little bit more fun than Trekking the National Parks, although definitely close enough for government work that it feels like it's part of the same conversation. It is like Trekking the National Parks, a bit meaner than Ticket to Ride. Now, it might just be that my family does not play Ticket to Ride at the level of viciousness that many people do. I often hear about people really kind of going out of their way to spite folks. In my experience, that isn't fun, but also not the best way to win, because right, like if I do something to cost you 10 points, sure, that makes you lose 10 points, but it doesn't gain me any points. Unless we're playing 2-player, it's not a zero-sum game. In Trekking the National Parks and Trekking the World, there's much more direct competition, I think, for the things that you're getting. And there's a bumping element where if I need to go somewhere and you're in my way, I can bump you out of the way, and that costs you in the game. So I enjoyed Trekking the World if I was at my game club and someone who's setting up say, hey, you want to play Trek in the World? I would play. I'm certainly not going to go buy it, and it's not a game that I feel compelled to seek out and play. But it was a fun time nonetheless, and I'm glad to have tried it. So that's Trekking the World, designed by Charlie Bink, published by Underdog Games. The next game I'm going to talk about is a silly little dexterity game. This is one that Rob picked up at Goodwill, I believe. He may have bought it somewhere else. I think he said Goodwill. It is a game from, I believe, 2017 is the publication date. And like I said, it's called Stick Stack. The way this game works is you have a little tower that you set up that's maybe 4 or 5 inches off the table with a little upside down bowl on the top of the table. And the bowl is sort of coated in orange bumpy plastic. And then inside the bowl, there's a tiny little pedestal with a thin base and then a flat top that sticks out. And that's white. And actually the bowl, now that I think about it, the bowl is multicolored. There's 3 colors on it, 2 or 3 colors on it, as you go around the bowl. So part of the bowl is orange, part of it's blue, part of it's, I don't know, another color. I don't remember. Pink, green. And so what you do is on your turn, you take a stick, and the sticks are sort of like jumbo stirring sticks from a coffee shop in terms of shape. They're flat and long and thin. They're maybe 6 or 7 inches long and maybe a 1/4 inch wide. Not very wide, maybe 1/2 inch. And they are covered in the same sort of plastic or rubber material. And the key thing about this material is it's got tiny little bumps in it, so it's high friction. And then the sticks are covered in this material and in the different colors that match the colors of the other parts of the game. Some of the sticks are just one color. Some of them will be like half or a third one color, then half of another color. They all have a white tips, so that you can balance them using that little pedestal I described in the middle. And so what happens on your first turn, if you're the very first person to go, you're going to take one of these sticks and you're going to balance it on the upside down thing. And the way you do that is either across the bowl so that it's sort of resting on it's touching the bowl on 2 sides, or you put it lengthwise into the bowl so that the tip is under that little pedestal. And then it's just kind of hanging off of the bowl. The rule is, though, that wherever you put it, the color of the rubber material on the stick, whatever it's touching on the bowl or on other sticks, has to be the same color. And now that stick, the post that the bowl balances on, is kind of bendy. And so as you're putting on things, the tower will begin to lean one way or another. And the more sticks you put on, the more it's leaning. And you can kind of put a new stick across 2 other sticks, or you can put it on the bowl, or you can sort of balance it in the way that the very first stick might have been, where you put the end in and then have it just sticking off. And your goal, of course, is to get rid of all your sticks. But the way the game works is that if when you put your stick on the bowl, some sticks fall off, then you take the sticks that fell off and they get added to your hand, and then the game continues. Now, if you knock all of the sticks off the bowl, then I believe the round ends and you get all the sticks that fell off. And the idea is to get rid of all your sticks or when the game is over. And if you have sticks in your hand, then you lose points. It's a relatively simple game. It's a dexterity game, in the neighborhood of that game with all the sticks sticking into like into a glass bowl with the marbles. I can't remember what it's called right now. Tiddlywinks, maybe. Yeah, so it's a dexterity game. I feel like it took a really long time to explain that when I could have just said, go look at a picture of it. But this is an audio podcast. Maybe you're driving or doing something and you wanted a carefully described mental image of a relatively simple dexterity game. Well, that's what you got. It was fun. I'd play it again. Innocuous, but amusing. Another one that, I don't know that I'd go out of my way to obtain it, but I'm happy to play it if somebody brought it out. I will say I probably would not, if I found this at a Goodwill tomorrow, I probably would not buy it. Just because I've reached the point where I'm trying to get rid of games I don't need more, especially if it's a game I'm not super compelled about. But if you get a chance to play it, you see it at a game library or something, you look for your end of the night game, it's a funny one. It's also totally conversable, right? Like you can start playing it and then you can chit chat while you play. It doesn't take it doesn't lock you down. That game was designed interestingly by the Forest Pruzan Creative. That's the name of the designer, Forest Pruzan Creative. I presume it's a creative group. There are a couple other credited designers as well, published by Broadway Toys. All right, the third game I want to talk about is the most involved, and this is The Thing, the board game. Now, as you know, there have been many games like about The Thing or sort of Thing adjacent. I would point to at least, I would point to several that you could arguably describe as The Thing. There's of course The Thing, Infection at Outpost 31, which is directly, again, about the John Carpenter movie. There is Who Goes There, which is a board game adaptation of the novella from John Campbell, which is of course the basis of The Thing from Outer Space, which is of course the basis of The Thing. So, these all kind of ratchet on top of each other, but the point is that you have a couple different options for how you might play The Thing. I would also point to Panic Station, which is a, I think, 2014 Stronghold Games game, which is also set around this theme. You have a base and you are going through the base looking for these parasites, and you can get infected by the parasites and you have to interact with each other and so on. There's an interesting conversation to be had about how soon a new version of a movie game should be made. The Thing Infection at Outpost 31 is, I think, 6 years old. It was published in 2017. So that means this new one is the same licensor, a new game based on the same property 6 years later. That's pretty fast. If I were the company that had that other game, I might be kind of irritated, although presumably their contract did not offer them exclusive use to the rights beyond a certain time. But I know that game is still commercially available, so I'm not sure how they worked that out. That said, I will say the new game it feels about on par. First impression, one play, feels about the same. Both games suffer from the particular problem of being very complicated in order to work well. And in order to play them well, you need to have one person who really understands the rules, who can run the game. This is also true of something like a Flying Frog game, like A Touch of Evil or Last Night on Earth. Those games work very well if you have one person who really knows the rules well, and the other people can kind of just come along for the ride. I would say my experience of The Thing game worked that way, and my experience of this one was that way as well. We had two people who really understood the rules well, and in playing, that meant the rest of us could understand them enough, and that would work. So if you're not familiar with this property at all, The Thing is a story about a bunch of people in Antarctica at a research station who come across a alien life form that appears to be able to mimic other life forms. So the Thing can take over, say, a dog and be in the camp as a dog, and nobody knows it's an alien. They can also take over people. When they're discovered, they have a body morphing ability that is super gross and really terrifying and deadly. And so the game is about trying to figure out which of the players is infected as the Thing and isolate them or kill them and to get rescued. Over the course of the game, you are going on missions, you're interacting with other players, trying not to get infected or trying to infect the other people, and eventually there are a couple different ways the humans can escape. One of them is a rescue helicopter. They have this neat mechanism by which people get in and then let other people in or not. And that part is really interesting and tension-filled because the humans have to let in all the humans and not let in any of the things in order to win. If they let even one thing on the helicopter, they lose, and all the things win. So it becomes a really interesting tension. That's the positive description of the game. The negative description of the game is that this is a pretty hard game to learn with a lot of finicky little rules that once someone knows them can be smoothed out through gameplay, but in the initial learning were arduous to tackle. And then the gameplay itself took a very long time. It was like a 3-hour game with like a 45-minute teach. So it used up our whole game night, which I enjoyed myself. I certainly had fun. And I probably would play again, especially if everybody already knew how to play, so we didn't have to do the long teach at the beginning. But there are a couple design elements in this game that I thought were really frustrating. The first one is, at the beginning of the game, the way that we determine who the Thing is we all draw tokens out of the bag. And the tokens either show like a picture of a robust, healthy husky or a sort of mutated, creepy dog face. And the problem is these are kind of silhouettes. So while you can tell what they are kind of confusing. And it would just make a lot more sense if they were clearly labeled. They just said infected or human on them, or had a much more clear image. And the same goes, I think, for the infection tokens that you use. The human one is very clearly human. It's a little silhouette of a person surrounded by a kind of stylized image of human DNA. But then the other one is, I think, supposed to be a face of a thing or something, but it's not understandable as that. Instead, really the way that you understand that you're infected, if you look at those tiles, is you didn't get the human one. So that part was not great. The game is also really fragile to error. In particular, like after you do an exchange with people, you're supposed to take your roll cards and shuffle them up. You have a roll card that says you're the thing, and you have a roll card that says you're human. Anytime you interact with another player, you're supposed to take your roll cards, shuffle them up, and then put the correct one on top and set them both down, right? Well, if you forget to do that, even once, you do the exchange and there's a lot going on, so you forget to rearrange your cards. Well, you've just communicated to people that in fact nothing changed. Because you'll always remember to go do it if you got infected, right? So that part is not good. I really like there's this suspicion track that is my favorite part of the game, where anytime you interact with another player, your suspicion goes up, and that's how the group decides who to test when they get a hold of tests. Finally, thematically, there's a really weird thing where the sabotage cards get placed into this deck and sabotage happens, but there's a disconnect between where the sabotage happens and where the characters go. So like if I can send my character to the machine room to repair the boiler, and I put a repair card in the deck, and then we draw a sabotage card, the captain of the group can decide that the sabotage card gets played on me in the boiler. And then later when the repair card comes up, there might not be anything to repair. In fact, that repair card gets wasted. Well, it feels weird to say like my character is going to go there and to be sabotaged, but we get to choose where that sabotage happens. Like the sabotage isn't being directed by the person who played it. It's just generally being used. It's weird and anti-thematic. But overall, I had a good time with the thing. I would recommend playing it if the negatives I've offered here, particularly the play length, don't turn you off too much. But I enjoyed it, and I thought it was as good as the Thing game, Infection at Outpost 31. I'll have to report back to you later how it compares to Panic Station, because Panic Station is still on my shelf of opportunity. So I do have a couple out of the dust plays to talk about today. Unfortunately, I did not bring my phone with me, so I can't remember if I talked about One Night Ultimate Werewolf. I think I did not, so I'm going to talk about it again, but I may cut that if it turns out I didn't. So One Night Ultimate Werewolf is a classic game from Bezier Games, which is, of course, the studio that introduced Ultimate Werewolf, the sort of commercialized version of the classic folk game, Mafia or Werewolf. In One Night Ultimate Werewolf, each player gets a role, and then there's a series of eyes closed commands in which players are maneuvering the tokens on the board and then accusing each other of having maneuvered the tokens on the board. The goal of the game is to figure out which players are werewolves and identify at least one of them, and then they get in trouble, and we go from there. It's a delightful game, really easy to play, takes like 7 minutes to play, like 2 minutes of the commands being read by the app, and then 5 minutes of play. So I definitely recommend it. If you've never played One Night Ultimate Werewolf before, it's a good time. It's pretty fun. I really like there's a variety of different roles that you get to do that add information into the system. And so the big part is to kind of try to figure out who's lying and what they're lying about and accuse the person. It's very light without much consequence. So the gameplay of it is it's an end of the night or beginning of the night thing. It's not serious enough to warrant long-term play. But it is a good time, and I would recommend it if you get a chance. That's One Night Ultimate Werewolf from Bezier Games. Worth a look if you've never played it. Or even if you have, go back, check it out again. It's a good time. Well, that's about it for me today. What have you been playing lately? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and share your experiences there. You can find show notes about all of the games we talked about today on rattleboxgames.com, where you can also email me, brendan@rattleboxgames.com. If you'd like to reach out to me on Board Game Geek, Wombat929 is my username there. If you'd like to play an asynchronous game with me, you can send me a message on Board Game Arena, Boîte à Jeux, or yukata.de. In all three places, my username is Wombat929. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.